Welcome, everyone. Glad you're joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, great to be here.
Today, we're digging into some foundational principles of the Turkish constitution, drawing on materials from Turkish law talks.
That's right. We're focusing specifically on Atatürk's nationalism and what it means for Turkey to be a democratic state, constitutionally speaking.
Exactly. Our mission is to really unpack these concepts. And hey, if you have questions as we go, feel free to drop them in the comments below the video.
Definitely. Let's get started.
Okay, so first up, the state's commitment to Atatürk's nationalism. Where do we see that?
Right away, Article 2. It states clearly, the Republic of Turkey is a state committed to Atatürk's nationalism.
And has it always been phrased exactly like that?
No, it's actually evolved.
Yeah.
Nationalism first popped up as a state characteristic back in the 1924 Constitution, but only with the 1937 amendments.
Okay.
Then the 1961 Constitution, well, it used the term national state. And interestingly, it put a detailed explanation of Turkish nationalism in its preamble.
Why the change? Why the detailed explanation?
There were concerns back then, worries that just saying nationalism, plain and simple, might be misunderstood, perhaps even interpreted as something like racism.
Ah, I see. So they wanted to clarify.
Exactly. So fast forward to 1982, and the Constitution adopts the specific phrase, Atatürk's nationalism, right there in Article 2. The aim was, for clarity and specificity.
Okay, that makes sense. So we have the term Atatürk's nationalism, but stepping back, what does nationalism itself generally mean?
In broad strokes, nationalism is about, well, loving one's nation. It involves a sense of pride in the nation's identity and a desire to see it flourish, to be prominent on the world stage.
But the definition of nation itself can be tricky, right?
Very tricky. And that leads to basically two main ways of understanding what constitutes a nation.
What are those?
First, there's the objective understanding. This view says a nation is defined by shared, sort of tangible characteristics. Like race, language, religion, maybe a common history, a shared culture, things you can point to.
Okay, the objective view. What's the second one?
The second is the subjective understanding. This one focuses more on the intangible. It's about spiritual connections, shared feelings, common values, a collective will to belong together.
So less about shared traits, more about a shared feeling or idea.
Precisely.
And where does Atatürk's nationalism fit in this picture? Objective or subjective?
Well, the general consensus among scholars is that Atatürk's nationalism leans heavily towards the subjective understanding.
Okay. Is there evidence for that in the Constitution itself?
Yes, absolutely. The preamble is quite revealing here.
How so? What does the preamble tell us?
If you look at the second paragraph, for instance, it describes the Turkish nation as an honorable member with equal rights of the family of world nations.
Okay.
That framing suggests identity based on shared values and international standing, not just, narrow objective criteria.
Right.
But the seventh paragraph, I think, really drives it home. It talks about Turkish citizens sharing national pride and honor, national joy and sorrow, duties, rights, burdens, benefits, all within this spirit of peace at home, peace in the world.
Those sound very much like shared feelings and ideals.
Exactly. These are subjective experiences, shared aspirations that bind the nation together, according to this view.
That makes sense. It's about the shared journey, the shared outlook. Now, you've mentioned the preamble a few times. What's its actual status? Does it carry legal weight?
That's a really important point. Not all constitutions even have a preamble.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the earlier Turkish constitutions, 1876, 1921, 1924, they didn't have one. Many modern ones do, of course.
And what do those preambles usually do?
Typically, they set out the reasons for the Constitution, maybe the underlying philosophy, the goals. Often, they're seen as having more of a moral or guiding value, not necessarily hard legal rules.
But you suggested the Turkish ones from 61 and 82 are different.
Yes, very different in this respect. In both the 1961 and 1982 constitutions, Article 2 explicitly refers to the principles found in the preamble.
Okay.
And crucially, both constitutions state very clearly that the preamble is part of the Constitution text.
Ah, so it's not just an introduction.
Not at all. That phrasing gives the preamble the same legal standing, the same legal force as any other article in the Constitution. It's legally binding. It has real teeth, as you might say.
Got it. So the preamble matters legally. Now, back to Article 2. It also says the Republic of Turkey is a democratic state. What are the core features of a democratic state in this constitutional context?
Well, if we look at how modern European states evolve, they often developed into what we call liberal democracies, and these tend to share some key features. While academics might debate the edges, there's broad agreement on about 6 essential elements.
6 elements. Okay, let's walk through them. What's the first one?
The first is pretty fundamental. The people who wield effective political power must be chosen through elections.
Effective political authorities. What does that mean in practice? Who are we talking about?
We're talking about the individuals and the bodies that actually make the big decisions, that determine and implement policy, both nationally and locally.
Can you give some Turkish examples?
Sure. So the legislative power-making laws belongs to the Grand National Assembly. Its 600 deputies are elected by general vote. That's Article 75.
Okay.
Then you have the executive power, headed by the president, who is directly elected by the people, according to Article 101.
Right.
And even at the local level, Article 127 requires that the main decision-making bodies and the executive bodies are chosen by the electorate, either directly or indirectly.
So elected officials at key levels. What's the second element of democracy?
Elections must be free.
Free. What does free mean here?
It means every voter must be able to cast their ballot according to their own conscience, their own free will, without facing any kind of pressure, intimidation, or manipulation.
Is that just about the act of voting itself?
No, it's broader than that. The freedom has to exist before the vote, too, during the campaign period, allowing people to form their opinions freely, and, of course, during the voting process itself.
Does the Constitution spell this out?
It does. Article 67, paragraph 2, lays down the guiding principles for elections and referendums. It says they must be free, equal, secret, direct, general voting, and involve public counting and tabulation, all under judicial oversight.
Free, equal, secret, direct, general, public counting, judicial supervision. Quite a list.
It covers the key aspects of ensuring genuine choice.
Okay, element 3.
Elections must be held regularly.
Regularly. Why is the timing so important?
Well, think about popular sovereignty, the idea that power ultimately rests with the people. If people couldn't choose or replace their leaders at predictable intervals, say every 4 or 5 years, then that sovereignty wouldn't mean much, would it?
Right, the accountability loop would be broken.
Exactly. Regular elections are essential for the people to exercise control, and the Constitution mandates this.
What are the time frames?
Article 77 requires elections for the Grand National Assembly and the presidency at least every 5 years. And Article 127 sets the same 5-year term for local elections.
5 years seems standard then. Okay, element 4.
Political pluralism and a multi-party political life must exist.
Pluralism. What does that involve?
It means, essentially, respecting that different people have different views on how society should be run. It means allowing groups with these different ideas to organize freely forming political parties, for example, and to compete fairly for political power.
So democracy isn't just about voting, it's about having real choices.
Absolutely. You could say democracy is, in essence, an institutionalized system of competition between different political ideas and platforms. A single-party system where no alternative views are allowed to seriously compete, well, that's not considered democratic under this framework.
Like a marketplace of ideas needs multiple sellers.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
And Article 68 of the Constitution really leans into this. It states that political parties are indispensable elements of democratic political life.
Indispensable.
Yes. And it says they can be established without needing prior permission. Plus, it guarantees citizens a right to form parties, join them, and resign from them.
So the Constitution explicitly supports a multi-party system.
Clearly, the 1982 Constitution definitely adopts a multi-party model.
Okay, that brings us to the 5th element.
Right. The opposition must have a genuine chance to come to power.
This builds on the idea of competition, doesn't it?
It does. It's not enough just to have multiple parties. If the system is set up, either formally or informally, so that the parties currently out of power, the opposition, have basically zero chance of ever winning an election and forming a government, then that competition isn't real. It's not truly democratic.
The possibility of change needs to be credible.
Exactly. That potential for alternation in power through the ballot box is a crucial democratic safeguard.
And how does the Turkish system stack up against this principle?
Well, looking at the constitutional framework itself, there's nothing inherent in its design that formally prevents an opposition party or coalition from winning elections and taking power. The structure allows for that possibility.
Okay, that leaves us with the 6th and final element.
Yes, and it's a crucial one. Fundamental rights and freedoms must be recognized and guaranteed.
Why is this so essential for democracy?
Because popular sovereignty and democratic governance rely on people being able to form their will freely and influence the government. How can they do that without basic protections?
Makes sense. You need freedom to participate meaningfully.
Precisely. Think about it. Without freedom of thought and expression, how can people discuss issues or criticize the government? Without freedom of the press and media, how do they get diverse information? Without the right to assemble or form associations, how can they organize politically?
So things like personal security, free speech, free press, assembly, association.
Freedom of travel, access to information, these are all vital components. They allow citizens to actually be citizens in a democratic sense.
And does the 1982 Constitution address these rights?
It does. The second part of the Constitution is dedicated entirely to fundamental rights and duties. It's divided into 4 sections covering a wide range of these rights and freedoms, recognizing and providing guarantees for them. Now, commentators might point to shortcomings or issues in practice, but the formal recognition is certainly there.
Okay, so quite a comprehensive framework outlined in the Constitution.
Yes, these 6 elements together paint the picture of what the Constitution means by a democratic state.
Right. So just to recap then, we've looked at 2 really core principles from Article 2 today. First, this commitment to Atatürk's nationalism, which we understand primarily as a subjective bond, reflected in that legally binding preamble.
Correct, with its emphasis on shared feeling and the peace at home, peace in the world ideal.
And second, the definition of Turkey as a democratic state built on these 6 pillars. Elected authorities, free and regular elections, political pluralism with multiple parties.
A real chance for the opposition to gain power, and the crucial guarantee of fundamental rights and freedoms.
It really lays out a specific vision.
It does. And perhaps a final thought for our listeners to ponder is, how do these foundational principles, as written in the Constitution, interact with and shape the ongoing legal and political landscape in Turkey today?
That's a great question to leave people with. A lot to think about there.
Indeed.
For everyone wanting to explore these kinds of Turkish legal topics in more detail, definitely head over to the Turkish Law Talks YouTube channel.
Yes, please do subscribe to the Turkish Law Talks channel if you haven't already, and give this video a like if you found it helpful.
Your engagement really helps. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
We'll see you in the next lesson.